Hans Christian Andersen's classic tale, The Emperor's New Clothes, is often a child's first foray into the realm of philosophy, as it raises questions regarding conformity, self-questioning, and obedience to authority. Its central theme is the idea that the emperor's wardrobe is real, is based in large part on the self-deception, self-doubt, and fear of reprisal from one's own peers for the charade to even be possible. The tale's synopsis can be summarized as that of two scammers appeal to the narcissistic tendencies of a local ruler, in declaring that they can weave him a suit that will be invisible only to the intellectually deficient, i.e. the stupid, among the local citizenry. And not wanting to be the only one seemingly too dull to see what isn't there, the entire population pretends to behold his fine new raiment. That is, until a child among them declares what's abundantly apparent: the emperor has no clothes. In a similar way, for over 100 years now, naturalists have been pointing to the abundant evidence of evolution to the West's population in declaring that it's obviously visible to those who aren't so blinded by their doltish and foolhardy commitment to religious beliefs. I mean, how can you not believe in evolution when natural selection can be observed? And so aggressively has this notion been put forth in an effort to avoid the embarrassment of seemingly intellectually deficient. Even many in the church have obediently smiled and nodded obeisance to this cloak of invisibility donned long ago by the story of evolution. But does natural selection equal evolution? You see, because natural selection is so equated with the story of evolution, and biblical creationists, of course, don't hold to the evolutionary story, many people are often surprised when they find out we actually believe in natural selection, perhaps thinking we do see the emperor's shiny get-up. That's because many people think natural selection is basically equivalent to molecules to man evolution, and is still one of the biggest proofs for evolution offered in school classrooms and popular media. And this is where it starts to get a little tricky for the average person, who often hears and understands conceptually that the generic meaning of evolution is change in living things over time. You see, every biologist on the planet, whether creationist or evolutionist, believes creatures can change over time. So simply stating something has changed can't mean some kind of fish-to-philosopher definition of evolution if both camps, almost diametrically opposed in their beliefs, affirm creatures can change. It's actually the type of change that both groups disagree on, and which kind observational science supports. Would have somehow needed to acquire brand new, never before existing genetic information for different forms, functions, and features like feathers, wings, or a different type of lung system, for instance, to turn it into a different kind, like a bird, for example. But the problem was that Darwin knew almost nothing of what we now know regarding modern genetics, and simply assumed that there was virtually no limit to the potential variation among the individuals of a species. Though truthfully, any animal breeder of his day could have told him otherwise, because people have been performing experimental breeding for thousands of years now. Darwin's far-fetched beliefs in strange ideas like the possibility of a race of bears fishing in the water, perhaps slowly developing shorter legs, longer tails, then wider mouths until they eventually evolved into whales, is the concept often called macroevolution today. And it makes for a good story. But like all fiction, it's completely unobservable outside of man-made depictions in textbooks and videos that are used to convince people of something no one has ever seen. The limits of what can be selected for are determined by the genetic variability already in existence within the creature, contrary to what Darwin imagined. Selection is a process dependent on what is available to be selected from, which is not limitless. The bottom line is you can't select what's not there. Genes that aren't in the gene pool of a kind can't be selected for. Take, for example, the tremendous diversity in domestic dogs, which includes over 150 varieties. Yet, even with all of this variation, from the St. Bernard to the Chihuahua, the Pekingese to the Poodle, the Pomeranian, and the Great Pyrenees. There are limits to what dog breeders can achieve. No matter how hard they try, they will never breed a flying dog with wings, feathers, and flight navigation systems through selection, because there are no genes within the gene pool to produce wings or any of the other numerous specializations necessary for flight to select from, so to speak. As Professor Walter Veith, former holder of the chair of zoology at the University of Western Cape, said when discussing natural selection, the very name selection implies that you're choosing between two or more variants. Natural selection never increases the number of variants, it only decreases them. So, how does a mechanism that makes less and less end up making more and more? So natural selection isn't a truly creative process. It only selects from what God made in the first place in each kind. To create truly new traits, mutations in the DNA would have had to happen that could somehow create, add, and integrate a huge amount of incredibly sophisticated information into the gene pool. Something that's never been observed. Genetic mutation may sound creative when used in pop culture references where superheroes gain fantastic abilities, but in actuality, they are genetic copying mistakes caused by various factors that occur when DNA produces copies of itself. And Neo-Darwinism basically says that mutations provide variety, while natural selection sorts out the best of this new genetic information in order to evolve creatures. But far from producing useful and novel genetic information, mutations tend to break things. They degrade the existing genetic code already in place. And while you can achieve different looks, such as normally red flowers being made pink when mutations delete some of the red pigment, for example, this is not actually the creation of a novel genetic feature from nothing. It's brought about by subtraction, not addition. But in reality, corruption of DNA coding is a recipe for chaos. And the worse the corruption, the greater the problems. This is why we see so many serious diseases today as the direct result of genetic mutation. These aren't the kinds of changes required for pond scum to people evolution to have occurred. So watch out for the equivocation and obfuscation that's often used when discussing the story of evolution. Evolutionists like to refer to the sort of variation we see among individual kinds of animals as microevolution, implying that this is somehow related to the chance formation of fundamentally new animals by the supposedly existing but never observed process known as macroevolution. However, there is no demonstrable experiment relating so-called microevolution and macroevolution, which makes these terms highly misleading. So be brave enough not to fold under the pressure of those around you that say evolution is a fact and it's been observed. Be honest. Has anyone ever seen something even close to what would be properly termed evolution in this world? No. The emperor has no clothes.